Alright, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Mel Matt Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Mel Matt. And today, we are going to be taking a look at one of the finest thrash metal bands around. And I've already done Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth. So that just leaves one more of the big four left. And we are going to be taking a look at Anthrax. That's right. We'll be taking a look at the final big four thrash metal band that I haven't taken a look at on the show, Anthrax. They just released a new album yesterday for All Kings, so it's the perfect time to talk about them. So, before we do that, let's go ahead and do some shouts like we always do. First of all, Chucky's Playground, great place to be. If you haven't signed up yet, definitely check it out. It's a really awesome place to be, awesome place to hang out, talk about Chucky, non-Chucky related stuff. Whatever your heart desires, it will be done there. And Movie Man with Spanky and G, definitely check that out as well. A great podcast, really entertaining. Definitely check it out. And so I guess I'll go ahead and talk about how I got into Anthrax. And yes, this will be another Guitar Hero story. I mean, remember, you know what? There's a lot of bands on Guitar Hero that I got into because of Guitar Hero, But anyway, yeah, the first song that I heard by Anthrax was Madhouse. And it's a really good song. And I really liked it. And that was really just like my first taste of Anthrax. And I really liked it. And so I decided to kind of seek them out a little bit. And I would see, music videos of their here and there on VH1 Classics Metal Mania. Specifically got the time from Persistence of Time. But I would also see the Indians music video every now and then as well. And, so Anthrax is a really good thrash metal band. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get things started. Let's take a look at their debut album, Fistful of Metal. And this was released in 1984. And, I was honestly kind of surprised by this. This is actually a pretty solid album. I wasn't really too sure what to expect going into it. But, I like it, Like, the production is actually pretty good for a debut album like this. I wasn't really expecting something like this. It has a hint of rawness to it, but for the most part, it's actually some pretty good production. You would think that it would be like one of their later albums, judging by the production value, but it's not. So it's actually pretty good. Also, this features a different lineup, specifically a different singer and a different bassist. The singer on here is Neil Turbin, bassist Dan Wilker, okay. And the rest of it consists of Dan Spitz on the lead guitar, Sky Ian on rhythm guitar, and Charlie Benante on drums. And this is actually a pretty good album, honestly, Death Rider, which begins the album, really sets the tone for what's about to happen. It's just full-on thrash metal in your face, that kind of stuff. And then you have a pretty cool cover of I'm 18 by Alice Cooper. That's very good as well. And Soldiers of Metal was pretty good as well. Anthrax, which is one of my favorite songs on there, might be my favorite song on the album, actually. And this also makes Anthrax one of the few heavy metal bands that have a song named after their own band. They join bands like Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden and Motorhead, and I'm sure there's others, but those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, that's pretty cool as well. And you have a cool instrumental called Across the River, which is cool. Then you got Howlin' Furies, and that's pretty good as well. So overall, the album is honestly pretty good. Again, not really what I was expecting. I was expecting it to kind of be a little bit worse, but I actually did enjoy it. And as far as how Neil Turbin's vocals are, they're okay. I don't think he's the best Anthrax singer ever, but I don't think he's the worst either. He's sort of like a generic kind of heavy metal vocalist, at that time in the 80s. He's not great, but he's not horrible either. He's just kind of generic, you know what I mean? But his vocals, they do fit the sound of the album. He fits them fine. But this was the only album that he did with Anthrax, so. But yeah, overall, Fistful of Metal, pretty good album, pretty good debut album. There were still sort of kinks that they needed to work out, but it really is very promising of the future that they're going to have. So we flash forward to a year later, and both the bassist and singer are fired, and we get Spreading the Disease. We have a lineup change, like I said. We have a new vocalist and a new bassist here. We have Joey Belladonna doing vocals here. And we also have Frank Bello. And I believe Frank Bello is actually Charlie Benetti's nephew. So, got a little family thing going on with Anthrax here. This one is definitely good. They're not classic Anthrax just yet. But they're still kind of evolving towards that. And you could probably say that this was the first album to really have that Anthrax sound, it's really the first, show that, Anthrax is here. This is what Anthrax sounds like. And Neil Turbin, even though he wasn't with the band at the time, he still co-wrote some songs on here, specifically Armed and Dangerous and Gung Ho. And I think Medusa, I think he co-wrote that. No, he didn't. He only co-wrote Armed and Dangerous and Gung Ho. And you can kind of tell they're sort of early Anthrax, but it has a more polished sound here. And this is the album that has Madhouse on here, which is probably not my favorite song, but definitely one of my favorite songs by them. And you also have a really cool song called "The Enemy," which starts off with a really good drum intro. In some ways, it's sort of a precursor to Indians in that sense, where it has a good drum intro, and the rest of the song is just great as well. And then you got Air and Lone Justice and. You got Armed and Dangerous, and Gung Ho, which ends the album. Really, not really that much to say, honestly. Just a really good album by Anthrax. You can tell that they're sort of evolving to that specific sound that they're going to have. It's just a really good album. Not really that much to say. If you're a thrash metal band, definitely check it out. It's a classic. And so, a couple years passes by, we get Among the Living. And, like I said with the previous one, they were sort of evolving towards that specific sound, that signature sound. And this is it. This is, the album for Anthrax. Technically, this would probably be their best album. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite, but it's definitely good. It's definitely their signature album. It's pretty much their breakthrough album, really. You got a ton of great songs on here. You got, the title track which starts things off. Then you got Caught in a Mosh, which is about the mosh pit, concerts. And Anthrax is pretty much the perfect band to kind of sing about that. And then you got I Am the Law, which is about Judge Dredd. And one thing that's pretty interesting about Anthrax is that they never really took things too seriously. A lot of their songs lyrically are sort of lighthearted and stuff like that. They show that they have a sense of humor. I think they're really one of the only thrash metal bands, specifically of the Big Four, who weren't really that serious. I think stuff like I Am the Law sort of kind of proves that, and even. Stuff like I'm the Man, which is an EP and song that they did after this. But, yeah. So, then you have stuff like Eflinikusfissin. I don't know how to say that. But NFL, that's a really good song as well. Skeleton in the Closet, Indians, ADI, Horror of It All, which has a really awesome guitar intro. That's just a really good. So this is a really good album, honestly. Among the Living, great classic album, by Anthrax. When I think of Anthrax, this album is usually one of the first ones that I think of. That's not a bad thing. I really like this album. Probably not my favorite album, but it has a lot of great stuff on it. And so, the very next year, in 1988, we get State of Euphoria. And with this one, yeah, this is just really kind of a meh album. Like, you can kind of tell it was rushed a little bit. I mean, it was released like a little over a year after Among the Living. And it's just like, it's just kind of forgettable, really. And the thing about it is that I think the album is just really repetitive. It's basically Among the Living Part 2. Like, it really does have that sound. And I don't really mean it in a bad way necessarily. But this is pretty much something that they could have done in their sleep, And I think, and even the Anthrax will even tell you that it was rushed and stuff like that. And I mean, that's not to say that it's a bad album, because it's not, Like, it has its moments here. You got Make Me Laugh, which is good, and Antisocial. And then you got a really cool instrumental called 13, and then Finale. So there are some good moments here, but those moments are very few and far in between. I wouldn't call this a horrible album by any means, but it's just kind of like a meh album, Like, it's not really that engaging. It's kind of just kind of boring, really. So I mean, not too much to say about it. State of Euphoria. Sort of a disappointing album from Anthrax, especially when following stuff like Among the Living, so really disappointing in that regard. So I probably wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you just want to say you've heard them all, I'd say check it out, but other than that, it's just kind of a bad album. It's not really that interesting. So a couple years after this, we get Persistence of Time, and this is released in 1990. And I will say this. This is honestly my favorite Anthrax album. This really is. It really is my favorite Anthrax album. And it's a pretty big departure from what they were doing before. They sort of move away from that thrash metal kind of sound, and they sort of go into more heavy metal, standard heavy metal affair, and they also kind of go progressive metal just a little bit, because a lot of these songs, are pretty long here. They're like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, some of them, and I do like that. Like, the first half of the album is like 7 minutes long, like the songs are 7 minutes. But I like that. A lot of these songs, I think specifically Intro to Reality, is a little bit Pink Floyd-ish, kind of, a little bit. And I really like this. And the lyrics are also a bit more darker, and they're a bit more, I guess, grounded in reality a little bit. They're kind of showing how they're maturing just a little bit in terms of writing the lyrics. These are really great. Like, Time is a really good intro. Just has that clock ticking. Just lets you know that this is going to be just a little bit different from what they've done before. And then you got Keeping the Family, which is one of my personal favorite Anthrax songs. And you got Belly of the Beast, which is really good. It's pretty catchy, honestly. And you got the Time, which is a Joe Jackson cover. And you got Gridlock and Discharge, and it just got all these great songs that are just really engaging. It's a hell of a lot more interesting than State of Euphoria, that's for sure. So, I mean, this is just a really good album. I'd say definitely check it out. Definitely one of my favorites. It's my favorite Anthrax record. It's just a really good, almost experimental in a way, and I think it really pays off. I just think it's a really great record. It's kind of thrash metal here and there, a bit progressive metal here and there. I just think it's a really cool album. So unfortunately, after this, Joey Belladonna ended up leaving the band. He went on to go do his solo album, his solo project. And so they ended up getting John Bush of Armored Saint to replace him on vocals. And that's where we get Sound of White Noise. And this was released in 1993. This begins the John Bush era of Anthrax. And I'll go ahead and I'll be honest, I never really liked John Bush's vocals for Anthrax. I don't know, like just something about it. It just didn't click for me. I just could not get into this particular era of the band. I'm just going to say it right now. These next few albums are going to be kind of boring to talk about because there's really not much to them. But they do have their moments. And Sound of White Noise, this is again another kind of change in direction for Anthrax, but instead of progressive metal, it's pretty grungy, honestly. And remember, 1993, this was when grunge is pretty much at its peak. So it's no surprise that they were going to try and cash in on, that whole grunge kind of thing. And, they really do. I don't know, like they just sound like an Alice in Chains wannabe or Pantera kind of band. I don't know. And I think the guy that produced, the album actually did produce some Alice in Chains albums. Let's see. He produced Facelift and Dirt. Yeah, he produced Facelift and Dirt Bottom. So it definitely has an Alice in Chains feel to it. Nothing wrong with either Alice in Chains or Pantera. I like them both, but I don't know. It's just not Anthrax, So I don't know. I mean, I wasn't really a big fan of this album. Like, it has its moments, honestly. Like, I think the intro, Potter's Field, it's decent, and Only is pretty good as well. Other than that, there's really not a ton of songs I like on here. Like, this is not an Exit, which is the final song on the record. That's pretty solid as well. Other than that, a lot of these are just really forgettable. I just don't remember too much about this album. And I'm sort of torn on whether this one is their worst. I really don't know. Because it's a tie between this one and Volume 8, maybe. I would say that. Maybe it's a mix between this one and Volume 8. I'm not sure which one is worse. But I don't know. I just could not get into this album. And so we get to Stomp 442. And this was released in 1995. And this is also the first album to not feature Dan Spitz on guitar. He ended up leaving. And they didn't really get a new guitarist. I think they ended up getting Paul Crook of... I think he's recorded with a Meatloaf. But I don't think he was really an official member of the band, unless I'm remembering things wrong. But as far as I know, I don't think he was officially a member of the band just yet. But he did guitar for some of these. And Scott Ian did some guitar as well as Charlie Benetti. So it's like... and Dimebag Darrell actually did guitar as well, which kind of makes sense, because Anthrax were sort of in their Pantera, Alice in Chains phase at this time, so it did kind of make sense for that to happen. But just a ton of additional musicians playing guitar here, so it is kind of weird in that sense. As far as this album goes, I will say that I did like it better than Sound of White Noise. I don't think it's a great album. I would say it's slightly underrated. I mean, again, I wouldn't say it's great or anything like that, but I do think it is solid. I think, I don't know, like, I'm sort of getting used to John Bush's vocals on this one. I think he's better here. I think he's sort of growing into the band at this time. There's not really any songs here that just outright jump out at me and or interesting or anything like that. I think Random Acts of Senseless Violence is pretty good, and Riding Shotgun and Perpetual Motion and stuff like that. Those are pretty cool as well. I mean, but there's not really any songs that just outright jump at me. But I do remember it. I enjoyed it while I was listening to it. Honestly, I do think that the music was pretty good. So I will say that it's better than Sound of White Noise. But definitely not their best, but not their worst either. It's okay. And so then we move on a few years later to Volume 8, The Threat is Real. And this was released in 1998. And, I don't know about this album. I really don't know. Because, this is probably my least favorite Anthrax record, to be honest. Just nothing really... I don't know. Just nothing really just stands out to me, Like, you got a couple of instrumental sections which are pretty cool. And I think Born Again Idiot is a really good song as well as Killing Box and stuff like that. And then you got a really weird song called Cup of Joe, which is about coffee. And I just found that so bizarre. I mean, like I said, Anthrax, they do have a sense of humor, but I thought, really? A song about a cup of coffee? Like, it reminds me of, Metalocalypse when Death Clock endorses Duncan Hill's coffee. Do you folks like coffee? Like, it really does remind me of that, Like, Anthrax coffee. Get it now. But, yeah, so that's... Like, when that is the highlight of the album, I don't know if that's a good thing to say. But, yeah, so... There are some moments here and there, You got a couple of songs that are pretty good. For the most part, it's just really forgettable. I don't know which one would be worse, Sound of White Noise or this one. I'd probably lean towards this one a little bit, but I don't know. Not really much to say about this one. It's just kind of really forgettable. And so then we move on to the 21st century, and Anthrax comes out with We Come For You All, and this was released in 2003, and the year 2003 strikes once again. And this one I was really surprised by, because I actually really liked this one. I really liked this one. Anthrax, with this album, they finally got out of that Pantera, Alice in Chains, grunge kind of phase. They sort of went back to their roots on this one a little bit. And I really like this one. There's a lot of good songs on here. They got a couple guest stars on here. Dimebag Darrell plays guitar on two of them, and those two are probably some of the strongest on the album, really. And you got Taking the Music Back, which actually has Roger Daltrey on backing vocals, which is really interesting. I never would have thought that Roger Daltrey would be on a thrash metal album, But I think it really works, and I think that song is also one of the strongest on it. And then you got Crash, which is a really shorter interlude. And I think it actually has Frank Bello on vocals here. I think. I don't know. Like that's what I read somewhere, because it doesn't really sound like John Bush. But you have a really cool intro to the album called Contact, and then What Doesn't Die is really good as well. Refuse to Be Denied. You got Black Dahlia, and just a lot of really great songs on here. And We've Come For You All is a really good outro to the album. Just a really good song, just a really good album here, And like for the first time, it really feels like John Bush is like really comfortable in this as the vocalist for this band, Yeah, it was really the first album where I was like, okay, this guy's actually pretty good, So I really like this album. I think it's just a really underrated album. So I'd say definitely check it out. So several years passes by, and Anthrax just they were kind of in a dark spot, in the 2000s, because they were doing, other things, and they were going through a ton of singers here. John Bush ended up leaving. Then they got Joey Belladonna for a reunion tour, I believe. Then he ended up leaving, and they got another singer called Dan Nelson for a couple years. And then he ended up leaving the band. So finally, Joey Belladonna ended up coming back once again to the band. And they ended up releasing Worship Music. And this was in 2011. And this one, it really is a return to form here. Whereas We've Come For You All was, sort of slowly returning to those thrash metal roots, this one definitely makes a triumphant return, especially with Joey Belladonna on vocals. And I really think that his vocals really do make a difference, honestly, because, really good album. I mean, it's sort of a weird thing. Like, when I think of this album, I tend to think of the apocalypse for some reason. I tend to think of apocalypses and zombies. I don't know why. But, the album cover really makes it. And then you got Earth on Hell and Fight Until You Can't, which is about zombies. So, yeah, that's probably why I think about it so much. And then you got I'm Alive, which is really good. And you got, sort of instrumental interludes called Hymn 1 and Hymn 2, which is really good. You got In the End, which is a tribute to Ryan James Dio and Dimebag Darrell, and that's really good as well. And you got Judas Priest, which is a tribute to Judas Priest. And, I mean, just a really good album, honestly. I think Joey Belladonna's vocals are really good on here. I think it's probably the best he's ever sounded on any Anthrax record, honestly. His vocals have sort of aged a little bit, but I do think that they really sound good, if not better, than his prime, I mean, this is just a really good album, I mean, I wasn't really sure what I could expect here. I was hoping that it would be good, and this is awesome. I mean, it's just a really great album. So definitely check it out. If you want Anthrax, if you want that classic Anthrax sound, you're going to get it on Worship Music. And that leads me to their most recent album that came out yesterday, For All Kings. And this one is great. This is probably their best one since Persistence of Time, maybe. Just like every song, on here hits, And you got, sort of, a really cool intro, a short intro called Impaled, and You Gotta Believe, which is really great, just a great chorus, And then you got Breathing Lightning, which is really good. You got Evil Twin, which was the first single release from the album. That's a really awesome song as well. That's probably one of my favorite Anthrax songs already. I just think that's a really good one. And you got Blood Eagle Wings, which is a really good 7-minute song. You got All of Them Thieves. And sometimes the chorus melody would sort of remind me of In the End from Worship Music. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but the vocal melody in the chorus sort of reminded me of In the End. And you got Zero Tolerance, which is a really good outro song. Just a really great album. This probably ranks among Anthrax's best already. I mean, it might be too early to tell, but it's definitely a very amazing album. It's a really good album. Their best in quite some time, so if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out, because it's just awesome. Not much to say about it, just awesome. Definitely check it out. So that is all for the Anthrax retrospective here. And Anthrax, for the most part, they've done some pretty good, albums here. They did have sort of, they did slow down some in the 90s a little bit. They sort of had a rough decade in the 90s, for the most part. But I think for the most part, I think they've done more good albums than bad albums, So, Anthrax is a good thrash metal band. So they are pretty cool. So that is all for the Melmat podcast, and I will see you all next time.